correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to Me and Steve. I'm here tonight with my good friend Steve. How are you tonight?
Oh, tired.
Tired?
As always.
I concur. So, yes?
Well, do we have a podcast for the week?
Yes, we do. Oh, well, actually, we've got 3 of them.
Weird.
No, it's the Court Games family.
Oh, I love court games.
Yeah, so they've got 3 podcasts on the network. I don't know how much all of them have been releasing, but I did see, I believe one of them, Fortune and Strife, has recently released a couple new episodes. But all 3 of these podcasts, be it the one called Court Games, the one called Fortune and Strife, or the one called Crimson Gold Agonies, they all center around the Legend of the Five Rings games from Fantasy Flight / Edge.
Mm-hmm.
And the one called Court Games is kind of a talk and discussion podcast. I think they deal some with the card game as well. Then you have Fortune and Strife, which I believe is the actual play that's done more as a kind of a demonstration. You know, they have some mechanics talk, dice rolls, etc. And then you have Crimson Gold Agonies, which is done much more as an audio drama. So depending on your flavor, or all 3, if you're into L5R or curious, there's a good place to go check them out. You can find them all at, well, they have various sub-addresses, but courtgamespod.com or cgapodcast.com. And, of course, there'll be links in the show notes where you can get to all of those. So that's that.
Yeah.
And what else do we got tonight, Steve?
You know what else we have? This weekend, as you're hearing this, October 1st and 2nd of 2022, we will be at the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo.
Yes.
PGX. That's at the Monroeville Convention Center. So if you're in Pittsburgh area, please come check us out. If you're not in the Pittsburgh area, well, it's a little short notice, but you might be able to find somewhere close by to stay.
Yeah, we'll both be running some games. We're doing a panel on Sunday.
Yep, panel Sunday, games Saturday. I think both of us have games Saturday.
Yep.
Interesting music, pinball machines, old arcade cabinets, old arcade games, old consoles, you know, everything that there is gaming.
There's a cosplay contest.
Yeah, they're running a cosplay contest, so if you're into that, that's cool. Yeah, it's like everything gaming.
Mm-hmm. And we did an episode not too long ago with the organizers of the con. I don't remember what the episode number is off the top of my head, but if you go back in the feed just a little bit, you'll see us talking about PGX and conventions, and that's us talking with Brian and Alex, who are 2 of the main organizers.
Yeah, that was a cool conversation.
Mm-hmm, it was.
So, speaking of cool conversations, let's break into a cool conversation for tonight.
Yeah, okay. Who are you talking to? Because I'm not cool.
Well, neither of us are, but... So, with it being October, as you hear this weekend, we gonna do Spooky Month again?
Oh, I'm working on it. I didn't get quite as much of a head start as I did last year. But I've got a couple of shows lined up already, and I'm working on some more.
So why don't we make our topic a little bit spooky tonight?
Okay.
Let's talk about basically using meta to build an atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So there's I don't want to say a lot, but a good handful of games that are based around real world situations dictating what happens in the game, which, I mean, that's all pretty much all tabletop RPGs, but I'm talking like Dread, where it's a Jenga tower that dictates how the game goes.
Mm-hmm.
Or what was the one with the candles?
The one we were talking about, 10 Candles.
10 Candles. Is that literally what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah. Where that works as like a countdown clock, and you know, you're supposed to play it in the dark with just the candles lighting it. And
yeah, I think either of those would be a little challenging if you had to play them online. I mean, I know I'm sure there's places where you can play Jenga online, but
I'm sure you could easily play both of those on Tabletop Simulator.
But I think especially with the 10 candles,
It's
you're going to lose the ambiance.
Yeah, I think you lose a little bit of it because you're not in person. I agree. But I mean, the core conceit of both of those games is you have basically this external ticking clock that dictates how the game goes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to talk about maybe how to use external forces to build suspense and build tension, really.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah. I mean, obviously the Jenga tower is, I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea.
Well, Jenga's a stressful game to begin with.
Yeah.
So I've never played Dread and I probably never will. My anxiety says no.
I'm actually curious about the new version of the Judge Dredd RPG that they used the Dread game for.
Oh yeah, I'm curious about that too. That looks cool.
I mean, I'm kind of annoyed that they pulled the license from EN Publishing for the one that they did, but you
Eh,
know, I get the marketing crossover.
I mean, it still exists.
Yeah, I bought it on Humble Bundle right before it disappeared. So
Yeah, I did pretty much the same thing, I think. I think I
yeah,
have
well, I
all
know
that
you
stuff.
had at least the core book for a while.
Yeah, I think I picked up they had an option that was like everything else, and I think I picked that up.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I'm curious about that myself to know how you run a game that isn't Dread in Dread.
Yeah, because yeah, the basically, as I understand it, having heard it played once or twice, playing the actual, and we're talking about the game Dread, not the Judge Dredd version of it at this point,
Right.
but the basically every time that your character makes an action that is, well, shall we say, of consequence,
Hmm.
you pull a block.
Yeah, anytime you would basically make a die roll.
Right. And so, yeah, obviously, as more and more of those things happen, the tower becomes more and more unstable. And, so it inherently builds tension as the story builds.
Right. Right. And I mean, 10 Candles uses the candles as basically a countdown timer.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with that one. I remember reading something about it a while ago, but
I would love to have somebody on to talk about 10 Candles because I think it seems like a really cool game that I'd like to know more about. But everything I understand of it is it basically uses the candles as a countdown timer. So as as time goes on, candles get put out, characters perish. It sort of gets darker in the room, sets a tone until it's eventually just pitch black because there's no candles left.
hmm
And I think that's really interesting.
yeah, I may have to. You know what? Maybe I'll see if I can get them to, might be worth reaching out to. Yeah, but no, 10 Candles. Yeah, I want to. I remember finding a read up of, finding a write up on it somewhere. But yeah, I want to say there's something where like, yeah, as different things happen or the candles go out or you, but it is described as more of a tragic horror game rather than survival horror.
Right. But and then there's stuff that's not necessarily made to be played that way, but you could absolutely run and add those external atmospheric elements. Like I would love to play a Call of Cthulhu game where we play in like I don't know, give me an old abandoned mansion and we're playing traditional Call of Cthulhu in the 30s, right?
hmm
Or give me, I don't remember. I want to say we talked to somebody who talked about playing it in somebody's shed.
I think that was Hooli.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, but
Well, and then yeah, you got those spiders that they have that would literally just suddenly be there.
right, and that's terrifying in and of itself. But no, like I can imagine playing like, oh man, the old gods of Appalachia, or isn't that what that game's called? It's coming out
Yeah,
soon.
yeah. I got an update recently on it, but I know they're working hard on it, but nothing yet as to when it's actually going to be released.
Well, imagine a game like that, but yet just a couple of people camping
Oh
in the
yeah.
woods, just around a campfire playing something like that.
Yeah.
Like that would be a really atmospheric, fun game. And you don't even have to go that in depth. It could even be little stuff.
hmm Well, that's
Sometimes, well, go ahead.
no, kind of what you're talking about there too is setting of your setting of where you're actually playing the game, not the game setting, but where do you as the people playing it set up to play the game, which can have an effect. Like you said, if you're playing it, even if you go to like some sort of campground and you're just playing at a picnic table, we're going to have, ambient noises from the
Mhm.
surrounding area, critters and whatever that could definitely make it higher tension, if you will, just because most of us aren't used to those noises all the time.
Yeah, most of us.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you are, if you got your head in the right space, a lot of natural noises are kind of creepy.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying I know that I could get myself creeped out real well with a I mean, I have friends that we were sitting around a campfire the other night, nobody was saying anything and the coyotes let loose and they about jumped out of their skin. Like just nothing, nobody said anything, but they were like, "Oh, like, well, it's the coyotes. You hear them all the time." But yeah, it could if you're in the right headspace, you get yourself in the right mindset, you're there. And I think getting yourself in the right mindset, if you have the right setting, that makes it a little bit easier too.
Yeah, yeah. If you can somehow, yeah, have your so to speak out of character setting lending cues to your in character setting,
Right.
that can be really effective.
And I can understand, I'm that way right now myself is that I have no games in person going. And I get that it's hard to getting in-person games going, especially with everything going on. And, you know, Spivey talked about it a little bit last week. COVID's still a thing. It's not something that's going away. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, there's other ways though I think you could get in that headspace. Like your virtual tabletop that you play on, unless you're not using one at all, I think if you were using something like Tabletop Simulator or a really well done virtual tabletop, that helps set that tone as well,
Mhm.
right? I really want to run a Call of Cthulhu game where I use the Clue board.
That could be neat.
Just use that as the map of the house, but I don't want to tell my players. Like I don't want to give them an exact map of the house. I just want to start describing like where things are at. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the game, they're just like, "Did we just? Was that the clue?" Yeah.
What about using, like, music?
Oh
I
yeah.
know we tried it, a little bit in my Cyberpunk 2020 game, but I don't have the, attention capacity to effectively, shuffle tracks, etcetera.
Right. We still need to reach out. There was that company that was recommended to us to reach out to talk about music and gaming.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was Sirenscape, which I know does a
I
lot
think
of
so.
soundscapes and so forth. Maybe even try and get a hold of the guy that does, tabletop audio.
Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes I have a hard time running music in a game. A lot of time what I do is I'll just pick a track and put it on as ambience in the
Mhm.
background, which I mean is exactly what we're talking about, just putting something on as ambience.
Right, but it's even more effective if you can cue it, in certain which
Well,
you do enough prep work, maybe build a playlist. Again, online, it's a little trickier, you need the right things to do it, but I think most of your VTTs will allow you in some form or other to do that, or you can configure things to do with it.
I think the biggest thing is you need a soundboard or a soundboard application
Mhm.
that you can just program sounds into or music cues into, get that all set up, and then you're really talking about just you just have to push a button when time comes,
Yeah.
which is a little bit I don't know. I've been there myself. I know how hard it can be to remember to push a button at the right time.
Yeah, well, and then that's where, with me, if I have music on, a lot of times it's just sort of playing in the background.
Right.
And I'm saying if I'm doing whatever, and so for me to remember to queue up this track as this starts, it's going to be a little tricky. Like I
Right.
could do it, but it's yet another thing I need to pay attention to, and I'm not good enough at being organized to have it set where I can just reach over and do it.
Well, and you could just I don't know. If you were doing something where you knew at this time this was going to happen, so Justin talked about that when Justin was on the podcast,
Mhm.
and just if you know things are happening at certain times, you just have it timed out to where maybe you have an alarm on your phone that goes off or something,
Yeah.
you know, but you have it timed out to where at this time this needs to play and at this time this needs to play because this needs to be happening by then.
Mhm. So just what about like using some sort of countdown timer for your table as far as, you have until the end of this song to resolve this scene.
Yeah, that would work. That would be an option that you have. I think that's interesting. I think you could really play with something like that. I had a GM when I was playing D&D. He would have everybody put a song in his playlist, and whenever your song came on, you got advantage
Uh-huh.
because it was like basically your hero music started playing.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was neat, but it made for a really interesting playlist.
Mhm.
But yeah, that having a song as a timer is neat. And depending on the game, you can use that thematically, right? Like
Right.
maybe you're playing a music based game and you go, okay, well, you guys have to the end of this song to figure out how not to get, how to win the battle of the bands or how to not get jumped by the bikers at the end of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be really interesting. I think another thing you could do is not even just sounds, but like sound bites or noises, I think really play well too,
Mhm.
especially in something like a Call of Cthulhu game, right?
Oh, yeah.
You get the right noises and you just hit your players with them without them expecting it, and they're going to crawl out of their skin because you're already tense going, I don't want to make the wrong mistake. I don't want to make the right, you know what I mean? I don't want to make the
Mhm.
wrong choice the right way, right?
Yeah, no, there's a song I'm thinking of the intro to now that would be great for something like that. If you could somehow kind of like loop it in and out,
Yeah. You just take a
a
little bit of prep work.
little bit of an obscure track, but it's I'll play it for you sometime.
Okay. But yeah, no, I think you could really get your players unnerved with something like that.
Mhm. And yeah, but just kind of like that little bit of like disquieted and unnerved, not like actually freaked out.
No, not in any sort of bad way, just that like, oof, I'm a little bit offset. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Well, and there's things you can do when you're running the game too to kind of do that, and they're not techniques that I would use all the time, but I think, like, one that I used when we were doing I think it was the Cyberpunk 2021 shot that I ran for you, geez, what was that now, 2.5, 3 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Where you guys were role playing a scene, just you and the other characters, and I know I've said before on the show that if your players are role playing, leave them alone and just watch. Most of the time that's the case, but you can do things to again help build tension or urgency in that. And what I would did to you at least once or twice was you're in the middle and I just all of a sudden your phone rings.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those things where yes, you're breaking up role playing, but it's a very natural way of breaking up role play. Like you could see that happening in reality, so you don't have a hard time grasping it.
Right, right. Yeah, I wasn't, like, breaking up, an action well, you could do that, though, with
Well, like even Cyberpunk 2020, you could just like say they're at a diner or something and all of a sudden a car drives through the front of the building while they're eating and talking and like that's a whole you can do that and interrupt your players and it be okay. I think more what you're more advising to avoid is like stopping your players role playing because you want to move on,
Right,
right?
right.
And I'm not saying I mean the GM's a player too, but you got to keep in mind that some of your players really just want to role play, and unless it's completely frivolous role playing, I would just let it happen.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is, I guess, it is a tool. It's not one you want to overuse, but you can get that what do you wanna say? That, "Oh, damn it, the phone's ringing again," reaction by actually interrupting occasionally.
Right. And I think another outside of game thing that you can use that I played a little bit within our RetroStar game. I didn't get a chance to really use it, but voice changers and voice modulators and auto tune and stuff like that just to try and like change up your voice, change up your sound, especially if you're playing online. you
Mhm,
know, Voice changers are easy to get a hold of and they're a good way of like helping your players distinguish, so if you're not good at voices, get a voice modulator. It'll help your players distinguish between the different characters
mhm.
and just pick a thing and be like, okay, well, this is this character, this is that character. And it may not be great, but it's going to be a lot better than, if you're really bad at voices, it's going to be better than being bad at voices. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that goes to you were talking about that, and to step back a little bit too, I've heard some people talk about when they're playing with music behind them in a game, sometimes they'll have tracks that are keyed specifically to a villain or a certain character,
Hmm.
and they may put them on a little bit before that character actually shows up, but that raises the tension in the room.
Yeah, they're on their way. Yeah, imagine doing that with like Strahd. Like,
Yeah. Well, look how the effect it was done with Vader in Star Wars.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, every movie has, well, almost every movie has villain music, right? Like,
Right.
this is the villain's theme. It plays, and the villain's coming. And the heroes have their theme too, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I that's a really, really cool idea that works well. Trying to think what else.
Yeah, it's because like, sometimes like, for me, a lot of times, these just sort of hit in the moment, and it's like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna try that."
Yeah. No, you just go, I'm gonna give that a try. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Oh well, didn't work. Oh darn. I mean, the worst, it doesn't work. I've told you before, I don't have like, I don't know. I've run a couple things where I played music in the background, and usually I just throw it on in the background to build a little bit of ambience. So like,
Mhm.
I'll have, say, D&D, I'll have a mix of like, this is tavern music, so if my players are at the tavern, or this is dungeon music, so if their players are in the dungeon, or if I'm playing like very vanilla D&D or just vanilla high fantasy in general, I can do that. That's not a problem. And that's another way to help build tension and build ambience when you're even online. Like I said, you can pipe in, just keep it. Unless you don't want yourself to be intelligible, which is another cool trick, right?
Mhm.
If you want yourself to not be intelligible as the GM, you could pipe in music, sound effects, anything over your levels, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, say you're trying to portray something in a busy airport, and let's play Genesis for a little bit, right? We're in a busy airport. I have an NPC that's trying to tell you something, and I make you roll to see if you can hear it or not, right? It's a
Mhm.
busy airport. If you can't hear it, it's very important that you hear it. If you don't, you're going to miss a big piece of important information. So maybe I'll have you do a roll prior to that that's going to pertain to this instead, right?
Mhm.
I've done this a lot. This is one of my go-to tricks is maybe 5 minutes before something happens, 10 minutes before something happens, I'll make you make a roll for something that you think is going to be more important, but I already have the outcome to it. I'm just trying to make you roll dice so I know how to deal with the situation later.
Right. You're, so to speak, pre-rolling the check so that you can set up the scene to reflect
The
what the
results.
roll told you.
Right. I do that. If I'm prepped out, I do that a decent amount.
Mhm.
Because it's a good way to keep your players off your trail, right? So to speak.
Yeah. And I think that's a whole 'nother subject of, how transparent should you be as a GM, which I think is maybe, a whole 'nother topic for a whole 'nother show.
Obfuscate, lie, cheat dice, and play games.
Yeah, but, like, yeah, I don't know. There's a fine line to walk between that and adversarial.
Yeah, well, but I'm a very behind the screen GM.
Mhm. Oh, I will freely admit that I will do things behind a screen to make the players wonder.
If I'm playing in front of the screen, and my players have picked up on this at this point. My main crew picked up on this a long time ago. If I'm playing in front of the screen or I don't have the screen up, they know my rolls don't mean anything. They know that I'm just making up numbers as I'm going, and it doesn't matter actually what I roll, because not look. Sometimes you just need some things to happen, and you just don't leave it up to dice as the
Yeah.
GM.
Well, see, okay. So, I'm gonna tangent here.
Let's tangent.
This is one of the supposed changes I've heard is coming with, what are they calling it? 1D and
20,
D,
yeah, 1 D&D.
is that they're removing criticals for NPCs or the bad guys, monsters, whatever.
Yeah, okay. Let me just stop you real quick. And we had Spivey on last week, and he talked a little bit about this. In all honesty, I am completely and utterly checked out with D&D. And I'm not trying to yuck anybody's yum. If that's your thing, that's great. I'm glad that you like an RPG. But for me, between the constant missteps and everything else with that I don't like about D&D, I'm done. Like fully out. I could care less about one D&D. But go on.
I'm not far behind you, but one of the things that I've heard that they're going to do is remove criticals for monsters, bad guys, whatever. I get it to a point. I've been in situations where I think that makes the game excessive. They make the game excessively swingy at low levels,
I
but at the same point, once
I
you
think
get
that's no, go ahead, sorry.
once you get up a couple levels, I
Yeah,
don't see the survivability of the game being an issue that you have to do something like that to fix.
I think that becomes then onus on GMs to decide how you want to do it. If you want to get rid of criticals and you don't want to play any criticals, that's on you. You decided to do that. If you want to keep criticals, then keep the criticals. Nobody's
Yeah.
telling you can't play that way, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I can see both sides of the argument. At low levels, a critical is absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
I also simultaneously miss the old days of D&D when things were supposed to be absolutely devastating.
Yeah. Well,
And it's nigh impossible at this point in 5th edition to kill, unless you have a completely inexperienced player, is nigh impossible to kill early characters.
not so much early.
Well, yes, kind of early, because it's unless you're running creatures that are over leveled for them, it is almost impossible to kill those characters.
Well, but I'm thinking back to the campaign that in some ways birthed this podcast. The very first encounter of that campaign, I don't remember. It might have been my character took a crit that set him down and we wiped. And we're sitting there, this is an hour and a half into the game, and we're looking at each other like, well, what do we do now? And it's like, well, how about we just reset it and try it again?
Write different names on the tops of the character sheets and just do it again.
Because like literally we're an hour and a half into the campaign. So like,
Yeah, you're at that point where you can't really make new characters because that's going to be another hour and a half. You're just not going to get to play for the rest of the night.
and so we literally redid the exact same encounter with the exact same players and the exact same characters, and we stomped it.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it wasn't meta whatever. It was just the luck of the dice. And like I said, I think if I remember correctly, and I may be wrong, but I think that the initial catalyst to it all was so to speak, a monster crit on a PC.
Well, to keep the tangent going, I think a little bit of that let's just do it again mentality. Like a party wipes now, it's not a huge deal if you don't make a new character. Like if the entire party wipes and you don't make a new character but start the campaign over again, it is not as big of a deal as it was back, let's say, AD&D days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because there has been a precedent set with video games where if your character dies, well, it's not like the arcade games where you put in more quarters and you get to go again. Now it's like console games where you just hit reset and do it again, right?
Yeah.
Mario jumps and misses the jump. We don't have to worry about, oh, well, now I get to play as Luigi. We get to play as Mario again, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. No, that's a fair point.
I think that was the idea that you have to make a new character, and the only way this happens is if you have better than 1% of the party survive, right? So of 5 people, if you have one person survive, they got out of there and they met a new group, or there's some story on how they met up with you with your group again, right?
Right.
But if you have like 2 out of 5 people survive, that's when you sort of got to go, well, at least give your characters new names, right? Like,
Fair.
but that's an early on thing. I don't think that works so much later. Like once you've become invested in a character forever, you can't just continue unless the players bring them back.
No, I agree with you there.
But yeah, no, like if it's the first thing, I don't think it's a huge deal to just hit continue and do it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get it. I understand why they're trying to do that, but at the same time it's a dice game. It's
Yeah.
always going to be random.
No, and look, I'm not the one who would normally suggest that, but in that circumstance, it was like we literally just started.
Right.
Like,
No, I literally just made this character, damn it. Like I don't want to have to do it again.
yeah, like come on, I made this character up on my way here today.
I did that one day. I had a game started and I wiped and my GM was like, "All right, make a new character." So I switched 2 stats around and changed the name and handed it back to him. I switched 2 stats, changed the name, kept the profession and everything the same, and just was like, "Here's my new character." I'm like, "This looks like the same character." Yep. This is his brother.
Oh yeah, no, that I mean, hey, but so back to using things to build tension, outside of just your descriptions in the game. I mean,
Timers. Oh my goodness.
yeah, timers.
Get yourself you could have an hourglass, you could have a timer on your phone set. The number of times that like I've had players defuse a bomb and just set a timer on it and been like, what's going to go off at this time, and so they're physically looking at the timer and then like trying to figure out the puzzle that is the bomb and building that tension that way. Timers are such a big, important, useful tool in the game, that in any game really, unless you're playing something very, very relaxed. But anything with serious tension, timers are a fantastic tool because everybody is affected by time crunch.
Hmm. Here's one that I heard about it from Russ Morrissey. He mentioned it on his podcast a long time ago, and I think he incorporated it into one of his games, but which one I don't know. But he's talked about where he will sometimes pick up a handful of D6, 5, 6 of them, whatever, and just pick a number at random that's on those dice, and we'll say through a scene, whatever maybe he's counting down to when the cops show up.
Right.
So he's got this handful of dice and he picks the number 5. So he rolls the handful of dice. Any die that comes up a 5, he sets to the side. Waits, 2 minutes or 2 turns or whatever. He rolls the dice that are left.
Mhm.
Anything that's a 5, and so this pool gradually gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but it's not a strict countdown.
Right.
That's something I've tried to use a time or two, where you're doing that. Yes, it's a countdown clock, but it's not rigid.
Right. I like something that I like in games is if you have a scene where there's gambling, make up a game outside of the game that the players can play to actually gamble their money away.
Yeah.
Right? Like we had a little bit of it and I didn't do it very well, but we had a little bit of it when we played Eberron of what was it, Ship Captain and Crew, which is a pretty common dice game. It's really
Mhm.
easy to play. It's really easy to teach people how to play. And it's something you could have players bet in-game money on and play the game outside of that.
Yeah, and that how do you wanna say it? Especially if you're doing kind of simple chance games, I think that's really cool.
Right.
Um,
I wouldn't want to do anything super complex like I wouldn't want to do anything super complex like a poker game.
yeah, that starts bordering into that it's a puzzle or riddle where it's the players that are playing, not the characters.
Right.
But if you're doing the chance games, that like, I've seen tables really get into that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would absolutely encourage chance games outside of the game just to keep the fun going, right?
Mhm.
And that's we started talking about horror, but that's a way of doing external things to set a mood in sort of more of a fun or exacerbated way. Now, obviously everybody has their things, so if that's one of the things that you're not cool with, if somebody says, "Hey, we're going to go to a casino," be like, "Hey, I'm not cool with like gambling or whatever," right?
Mhm.
That's when you need to step up and be like, "That's not for me," but okay, yeah, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's just a thought that occurred to me. What about, and I know you're more into board games than I am, but are there I'm sure there are board games that have little like sub games or whatever within them, small mechanics that you could borrow and use in an RPG game like what we're talking here with these little games of chance where okay, we're going to kind of step outside the game here and do this, but sort of while you're playing that, you're narrating what's going on in your regular game too.
Ooh! I know a good one for this, and you
Okay.
would recognize this game. You might recognize this game. I don't know. There's a game called Don't Break the Ice. It's by Hasbro. It's a kids
Mhm.
game.
I remember it.
Yeah, you could absolutely play that if they were like trying to, I don't know, do a thing, right? Like the players are trying to break something, but like I don't know how you would justify it in game, but you could play a game like Don't Break the Ice, right?
Mhm.
And or you could play like any of those kids Hasbro games.
Operation.
Yeah, Operation. Oh my goodness, Operation. Give the rogue of the Operation board and be like, yeah, all right. Well, you get to see what you pick out of that chest.
Yeah, 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 if you're doing a heist thing, if you could somehow I mean, again, that
What is that? Not sorry. The one where the pieces pop out of the. It's a timed board game where the pieces pop out.
I remember what you're talking about, but I don't remember what it's called. Oh, again, some of it, maybe you don't do this as a serious part in a very serious game, but at the same point, if it's something like this, in the right circumstance, it could be a lot of fun. But I was thinking just in terms of,
Perfection.
okay,
Perfection. That's the name of that game.
if you could use, we'll call it props
Mm-hmm.
from something else that you happen to have, to kind of, give that tactile interaction.
Yeah, no, any of those, like, I think any of those simple games would be a lot of fun. Well, not any of them. Obviously, don't play Monopoly in the middle of your tabletop game.
Yeah.
A, Monopoly's terrible. Just don't play Monopoly in general. But B, Monopoly never ends. And C, nobody likes Monopoly. If you like Monopoly, I would love to hear your angry letter. Please write into the podcast about how you love Monopoly and we were wrong. How dare we how dare we diss Monopoly like that?
Well, yeah. So what else? I liked what you were talking about though about, like voice changers, how you speak, even, just the tone you use when you're speaking can
Yeah.
also really affect, the mood and the tension.
Well, and we've talked a lot about Critical Role, but you watch somebody like Matt Mercer, his physical changes to reflect the character they're speaking with.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's something that anybody, don't want to say anybody, but that's something that, most people could do fairly easily, right?
Yeah, you can make the motions. You may not have Matt's skill at voices, or you might be working alongside him instead of whatever it is you already do. But yeah, like you said, you can do something, and your friends are going to get it. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And the
Yeah.
thing is, you're playing with your friends, so have a good time.
Well, and if you're not playing with friends, then be a little bit over exaggerated. And that's okay.
Hmm.
That's okay. Because people, like, as GMs, I think one of the big mistakes, and I've talked about this before, one of the biggest mistakes we make is we try to be subtle and expect people to pick up on our subtlety.
Hmm.
And then we're always, at least for me, I'm always astonished when people are like, "Oh, I didn't get that at all."
Yeah, well, subtlety is a weird thing, I think, and especially in this context, because I think if people get it, they really appreciate the subtlety.
Yeah,
But that's a big if.
yes, and at the same time, when you're unsubtle, sometimes people are like, "Oh, that was really subtle." Like sometimes we get it in our head that this is really obvious when it's not.
Right, right.
Because I do that myself. I'm like, "Oh, this is so obvious. They're gonna pick up on this right away." I did it in Mutant City Blues. I was like, "They're gonna pick up on this," and then you guys didn't pick up on some of the stuff, and I'm like, "Oh, they're not. Oh, they're just not. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, I'll just tell them." And then you know, a couple things got told to you guys and you were just like, whoa. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, well,
It's Fight Club, right? Like the movie Fight Club, spoiler for what, 28-year-old movie? Have you ever seen it, Steve?
nope.
Oh, well then I won't spoil
All I
it.
know is the number one rule is you don't talk about Fight Club.
You need to find it and watch it because it's a really good movie. Well, it's a movie. It's definitely a movie that should be on the list of things that you should watch at some point. I don't want to say it's really good because, yeah, it's a little overplayed, but I think you would enjoy Fight Club, knowing your
Okay.
taste in things. But Fight Club has a twist that you never saw coming, but all the hints were there. But anyways, yeah,
Well, I think the other thing you're talking about, and raising tension, all these things we've talked about, I think a big factor is to not overuse any of them.
no, but you can use all of them in the same game.
Yes. But it's the old classic boy who cried wolf. If you go back to the same well too many times, it loses its impact. But if you use a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of whatever, then people notice, then it has an effect.
Give your stuff space to breathe.
Uh-huh.
It's important. It's important. Now, that doesn't mean give everything space to breathe. Some things need to be said and be done with and then move on. And some things need to be not heard, and that's okay. But it's important to give like weighty things space to breathe, especially horror. Giving horror space to breathe lets your players get either in a false sense of security or lets them stew on what they saw and makes them paranoid, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what Chris was talking about last week. You have to use the horror in the right spot, because if you just continue to hammer away with it, it's not horror anymore.
Right.
And that's where I know, well, I think anyway, what Ken was talking about with Ken Height with his roller coaster was that when you're riding a roller coaster, you have those moments where it slows down and it's smooth, and then the bottom drops out.
Right.
And then it does a couple of weird twists and turns, and then it slows down again. And it's that, for lack of a better way to say it, what was the Jason Statham movie where he had to keep his heart rate above whatever?
Oh,
I haven't seen it, but I remember hearing about it. But like, so to speak, I'm guessing that movie is very fast paced, in your face the whole way through. And at some point that becomes tiring. It's no longer exciting.
Oh no, that movie is exhausting. I love it.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, that's, if you do that to your players every session, it's no longer fun. If you do that to them for an hour or maybe even a whole session where it's very, very fast paced, now,
Crank.
but if you do that over and over again, it no longer has an impact.
Crank is the name of that movie.
Okay.
And that movie has a pace that is perfect. It's bonkers and fun and wild, and yeah. That's a Sunday afternoon if there ever was one. Anyways, well, with that bombshell dropped, I think it's time we move on to Game of the Week.
Woohoo! Game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
I have one.
Okay.
My game it's on Kickstarter. It's about to go out. The guy's giving literal demos of it. It's kicked. Or it's started, I should say. It's not kicked. I picked the wrong half of that.
Wrong half of the word, Steve. You got all the coal, but none of the slaw.
Right. Anyways, it's called Beasts and Basements. Beasts and Basements. And it's a kid's tabletop RPG.
Okay. Let me see if I can find this real quick.
I can send it to you.
Oh, that'll work. That'll be quicker.
Bushki.
Pushki. There we go.
And it's advertised as a tabletop RPG for all ages. And it absolutely could be. I could see myself playing this with a group of people who just want to sit down, play something light, and move on. The game looks a lot of fun. You have basically 3 stats: strength, strongness, speediness, and smartness. you roll up your character, you use those 3 stats, and then you're dealt a stack of cards. It's basically a hand, and you're gonna go through those cards, and that's gonna be the equipment, the spells, the creatures, everything you have in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks really simple, really fun and cute. The box set comes with everything you need to play the game. And it looks like, and from what I was seeing of the guy, I watched a little bit of the guy play it today, or the creator play it. It looks like it's sort of like you package up the cards and they crack them in basically draft packs, like you would a pack of cards.
Okay.
And each, basically as you crack the pack of cards, that becomes your character's ability, your character's equipment.
Okay.
So I thought that looked really fun, really simple, really cute, really light, just something fun to check out.
Yeah. Looks like they're at least it's funded.
Yeah, it's backed. It didn't get all of its stretch goals, but it is backed, and I've seen the game played, so it should be. I don't know where they're at with that game, but
Yeah, the original estimate was February, but
I know you can pre-order it. I would imagine they probably ran into some, everybody's ran into printing issues.
yeah, especially of late, it's hitting everybody.
Yeah.
Oh my. All right, now that does look kind of pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me hit you back with one here. There, let me send you a link. My pick this week is a game called Vintage Space, and it's a little $5 PDF. It says, "Hark back to the days of Battlestar Galactica, Buck Rogers in the 25th century, and Space 1999 with Vintage
Cool.
Space. Back when villains were cruel, heroes were dashing, robots made silly sound effects, and they all had feathered hair. It
Yeah.
is. It claims itself as a retro clone of one of the most influential RPGs of the era, one that used D100 and had players portraying fleet officers exploring the ultimate frontier." So we can all guess what that would be.
Mhm.
Um, but it's
Star
saying it
Wars.
is. It says it's more than a clone. It distills the essence of the original rules to make the game go faster, so it's more of a spiritual successor. You know, tone of the game's optimistic. Violence is always portrayed as the least desirable outcome of any situation. So, hey, for like I said, for $5 for a 70-page PDF
Could be good.
from Thunder Egg Productions, and when I clicked on the author's name to see what else they might have listed on drive-through, it appears that they've done a bunch of work with Modifius, Edge Studios, and some others. And let me see, because of course I closed that tab. But yeah, like they've worked on the new line of Star Trek. They've done some work with Legend of the Five Rings. Of course, my computer is being slow.
Well, it sounds like they have the pedigree to back up a
Yeah,
pretty
like
decent game.
yeah, like and oh, they've done some work for Mongoose on Traveler.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would trust these people with
Yeah, like it appears
that
that
type of game.
they this isn't like their first deal, right?
Right.
So yeah, like it just like I said, it seems interesting.
Yeah. Very neat.
So yeah, that's mine. Like I said, that's called Vintage Space. I'll have to send that
Nice.
one to Chris. That seems like it might be right up his alley.
He might like that. That seems like it would be up his alley. With all that being said, I want to thank everyone for listening. Remind y'all to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs. Oh, and as always, links to everything are in the show notes. But be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast, on Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Boopity boop boop boop.
Ba-bum.
Well, being as we're recording this and this episode's going to go up no, brain. Hold on. Stop. Delete that.
Delete that, strike that, reverse it.
Yep.